welcome you with us here on MSME Dialogues on the Leaders of Tomorrow, and I'm in conversation with Ganesh Ayyar of Mphasis to talk about all things digital and all things entrepreneurial. Thank you very much for speaking with us here on ET Now, Ganesh. Let me kick this interview off by asking you to talk to us about the model that you've incubated, if I can use that word, within Mphasis, where you encourage startups by employees. This is an initiative that was started last year, I understand. Help our viewers understand how it works.
See, the basic tenet of competition as we look ahead is that you need to operate as thousands of canoes and not as a large ship. And for that, you have to incubate newer ideas and give them that independence so that they can bloom. That was the kind of idea behind. So 3 employees came up to me and said that I have a brilliant idea in the space of governance, risk and compliance. So I said, why don't you start a company within the company or a startup within a company, and we called it corporate supported startup, which is CartUp. And I believe as we look ahead in digital revolution, larger companies will struggle because their turning radius would be bigger. They will struggle to transform and they may crush under their own weight. So you need to be nimble, agile. You need to empower people. One needs to experiment. And for that, the concept of startup within a larger company is a very, very appealing idea as far as I am concerned.
Would you look at, eventually maybe acquiring some of these companies? How does it work? How does it fit in? You've talked about the ethos of Mphasis and how it really fits in with that. But in the larger picture, explain to our viewers and, some of the other companies that are possibly interested in knowing how the model is concerned.
See, the culture of a startup is very, very different. It has to reach certain scale before you can rush and acquire them. Because if you start acquiring them, you may end up killing the entrepreneurial spirit. The spirit which drives the startup towards success. So I would like to have intense partnership, not only partnership, at a personal level. If I'm not looking for commercial interest for me, but at a personal level, if I could be of help to these entrepreneurs, either in providing a point of view or providing Mphasis as a go-to-market platform, would love to do that. But I will not rush to acquire them. I would like to see them operating as a startup, having that entrepreneurial spirit, growing, succeeding. And at that stage, we could look at a loosely coupled acquisition model.
Okay. Do you see this happening in the industry?
See, it's a very challenging time for the industry. If you look at this industry, it has been tremendously successful in the last 20 years. Many economic downturns this industry has handled, and it has grown from strength to strength. But the fundamental model of this industry has been asset light and human heavy. Now going forward, it is going to be human light, asset light and automation heavy. It's a fundamental change that we are experiencing. So companies, CEOs who are ready to give up their ego, give up their past success and unlearn and relearn, become humble, hit the ground running, they will succeed. Because we have seen in many industries, big companies failing. So I don't believe we are immune from failure, and there will be some failures. I'm just working towards ensuring that Mphasis is not a failure but a success.
Okay. How necessary, in your opinion, is it for companies then to engage with employees and encourage those who have these startup ideas to go ahead and really chase those?
See, we have based our company on 4 cultural tenets: empowerment, experimentation, customer centricity, and outcome focus. Some of them on surface look conflicting, and they are, because the success is about managing and not managing or. So in that sense, it is a tough battle. There are many concepts which exist. They exist in books, they come from consultants, very, very hard to implement. So when you talk about experimentation, you also need to think about how do I continue to serve my existing clients, how do I continue to generate results. Balancing act is a tough act, but one doesn't have a choice. We need to innovate, we need to promote the culture of experimentation, we need to engage employees, we need to empower. In fact, we need to get out of their way of success, because many times corporate come in the way of our employees of they becoming successful.
Since you're so closely involved with what is happening in the startup environment, I want to talk to you about valuations that we've seen recently in the market for several of the large companies which have gone through the startup phase. Do you think that's any amount of concern, one, for the investors who are possibly looking at putting money into these startups, and two, what's the message that people starting out can then see from this correction in valuations?
See, there's almost two religious camps out there. One camp believes that just keep growing, you don't have to generate profit, top line and future-led valuation. There is another camp which believes ultimately it has to generate returns. The lines are kind of thick between these two camps. And to share with you my personal view, I belong to the camp that ultimately it has to generate value to the shareholders. So if we get swayed by fancy valuations which come about and start believing that I have generated value, yes, you could probably last 3 years, 4 years, but at some stage reality will catch up with you. At least I'm not saying I'm right, but that is my personal belief system. And hence you have to think about generating value for the share owners. But for that you have to generate value for your customers first. I completely acknowledge that. In fact, I believe in it. But I belong to that camp, if I may.
Okay, so do you think that the market is reaching correct valuations at this point then, as far as the startup industry is concerned?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And it's good to have these kind of fancy valuation because what it does is it takes bright people to enter the sphere of entrepreneurship. Startup is the future of not just the industry, but of India as well. Because what it does is it brings innovation. It changes the perception that we are just about people and educational qualification. It takes us to the stage where we are adding tremendous value. So I believe these fancy valuations are helping India as a country and helping the industry, which is a good factor. But I don't believe that it has reached a realistic level, and I expect some correction or significant correction in that.
Okay. You were talking previously about how the industry is moving to a human light model, but the industry that you are in is still very dependent as far as people are concerned. The Leaders of Tomorrow is a daily show, and most of the queries related to HR, people want to know how to go about hiring the right talent. What is the right amount of money possibly that you need to be spending on hiring talent and then retaining that talent? What advice would you have?
See, ultimately it has to be a culture of unlearning and learning. Okay. And it starts with me. I can become redundant tomorrow. Just because I have been successful in the last 30 odd years and have made it to be a CEO doesn't guarantee that I will be relevant and successful in coming days, weeks, months and years. Okay. So it has to start with me, because leaders cast their shadow on the organization. So many times, we come out and preach, oh, you have to learn, you have to change. And we don't look at the mirror and say, am I changing? Am I unlearning and learning? So first point I want to say, before you rush to hire the right talent, you need to look at yourself and say how you are changing. Second point, employees are there to do a good job, fundamentally. They want to be successful. They're not there to do a bad job. They need to be given an environment. That is the role of management, which supports them in their unlearning and learning. At the same time, it also creates a role, some kind of recognition mechanism where we can show people who have made that as a change. So that's the second factor. Last but not least, when we hire people, we look for their educational background, how successful they were in their prior roles. Very little attention is given to their attitude and aptitude towards learning. And one has to really focus on that. Second point is, focus on where you want to go rather than where you were. And it's a hard process. Interviewing is an imperfect process. We will continue to make mistakes, but that's all right. because that's what makes this world beautiful. We are all human beings. At the end of the day, I want to reiterate, it is not just whom you hire, it is about what you practice, which makes company as a learning organization.
We've spoken about hiring talent. I also want to touch upon retaining talent. The feedback that we get from a lot of our viewers is that the kind of roles and the kind of money that MSMEs can offer compared with more fancier startups is very limited, and they say that they end up losing a lot of the employees. Usually the turnover is within a couple of months. What advice would you have about retaining talent? Then I know you've spoken about training and engaging them, but anything else that you would suggest would really go a long way for these MSMEs?
By the way, this challenge is not just there for MSMEs, it's for larger firms too, because we lose talent to startup. And when you analyze why do employees stay, there are various factors. People talk about salary. Actually, it's not the most important factor, it's one of the important factors. But the most important factor is the winning feeling. If you can give winning feeling to every employee, they look for reasons to stay rather than reasons to leave. And that includes how do you inject value in employees, how do you recognize employees, how do you as a team win, and how do you spread the winning feeling to everyone. So when India wins a test match, we just won a test match, if Virat Kohli goes and gives an interview saying that it is my double century which has resulted in a win, what it does is the winning feeling doesn't spread. But instead, what did he say? He basically went and said that everyone played their role, and he complimented other players rather than glorifying himself. So it's when a win happens, spread the cheer, give due credit. Somebody said, look out of the window when you succeed, which means look out and give credit to others. When you fail, look at the mirror. Which means that you look at yourself, what made you cause this downfall or this failure. So my recommendation would be liberal in giving credit, and most importantly, keep succeeding. To succeed, you have to fail, right? But give credit.
All right, do hold that thought. We'll take a very quick break on that note, but when we come back, we'll continue this conversation to tell you what you, the MSME entrepreneur, should know when starting out. Welcome back. You're with us here on MSME Dialogue from the Leaders of Tomorrow, and I'm continuing this conversation with Ganesh Ayyar of Mphasis. Even as we're talking about training, I want to talk about the education system in India, and whether, in your opinion, we are at a place where the education system is enabling people to start thinking like entrepreneurs.
See, our education system has served us well for the last 25 years. At the same time, I believe it will not serve us well for the next 25 years. Because the emphasis is a lot on academic learning. There is not enough in the system where we expose our students to realities of the world. In fact, in many ways, I believe classrooms are redundant. Teachers, traditional teachers, significantly have been replaced by Google. The whole education, I have greatest respect for teachers. So my father was a teacher as well. But my point is, every profession has to reinvent. And education as a system, it's high time we reinvent. It has served its purpose, and it will not serve its purpose in the next 25 years unless it reinvents. And corporates have a role to play to join hands with educational institutions so that they can be successful. It's not a kind of patriotic act. It is an act which will help companies to be successful by partnering with educational institutions in reinventing education, if I may.
Can you elaborate on that? How do you see that model working?
Companies have to cross the boundary, saying that my job is to do business. But our role has to be, how do I take our business knowledge and reinvent ourselves by crossing boundary and kind of taking that knowledge to educational institution, and as a process learning from them and bringing it back to the business world as well.
So I want to make a distinction between higher education and primary education. Higher education to some extent, like the IITs and the incubation cells, are doing something to encourage entrepreneurs. How about our primary education system? How do you see that changing and really nurturing entrepreneurs very young?
I will come to primary education, but IIT is not India. IIT is just cream of the crop. It is just touching small percentage of our student population. The moment we start getting confused IIT as the education system of India, then we will not reinvent ourselves. Now coming to primary education, young minds have tremendous ability to learn and contribute. And we have this concept that you have to slowly learn, and we burden them with a lot of education. Even our social psyche has come to a stage where parents are more involved in education than they ought to be. They need to give that free hand to students so that they can have childhood, they can experiment, they can fail, they can fall, and our role would be to provide that support environment. And what happens in primary education, we emphasize so much on success that failure becomes a negative term. Right? As a society, we don't tolerate failure. I'm not wishing failure for anyone, but at the same time, if you don't push the boundaries of learning, boundaries of experimentation, and when you are pushing, when you start failing. For that, you have to fail. Failure is a better teacher than success. So my point is, our environment has to be such where we need to unleash the potential of young minds. Give them an opportunity to be in a platform where they are applying their knowledge in real world. And teachers, parents somehow have to get out of their way, because marks, examination, comparison with fellow students, all this is actually going to put so much of pressure that maybe they're not enjoying learning, right? So we need to make it fun. We need to make it enjoyable.
It's a lot of food for thought. Let's also talk about mentoring at this point, Ganesh. What advice would you have for our viewers in terms of how critical it is for them, for entrepreneurs, for MSMEs, SMEs, to really have a mentor on board?
I think maybe the concept of mentor is overstated. You have to cross the boundary to learn from each other. And it need not be from your industry, it need not be your size. For example, I can share based on the bullet holes that I have, based on my failure, my learning with, let's say, a startup. Would love to do that. At the same time, they should not become subservient to mentors. What makes them special is their entrepreneurial spirit, is this concept that I can succeed, and they need to nurture that. They should not allow someone to come and brainwash them into submission. So I think they need to look for partners in learning, because somehow I think of mentors as a hierarchical system. Here is a mentor and here is a disciples kind of thing, right? Probably that needs to change. And most importantly, when I look at startups, two things strike me big time in my discussion with them. They fundamentally believe a bright idea can be a successful commercial idea. The difference is, you need to think about what's in it for the customer. You need to think about, there are lots of bright ideas in the world. The moment there is a scent of success, competition will come in. How will you differentiate, how you will compete? This is the go-to-market question, if I may, right? So that gets not as much attention. They tend to focus a lot on a bright idea. Second thing is cash flow. cash flow is supremely important, because the moment you're on borrowed money, your bright idea and your entrepreneurial spirit may get curbed. So you need to continuously think how you will manage your cash flow.
So then what's the advice you would have for entrepreneurs in terms of surviving the first year of starting out?
See, first have friends who can help you with cash. There is a lot of cash available. So cash is not in short supply. Second is, think customer in rather than a bright idea alone. Bright idea is important because that's what is sparking the interest in startup. But think of customer in. Who's going to be your customer? Why would they buy what you are selling? In this case, a customer can be an enterprise or an end user. But whatever you are planning to do, think of customer and how will you compete, how will you differentiate, why would they buy, what's in it for the customer.
As we wind down this conversation, my last two questions, and the first is, you're a big believer as far as digital is concerned. Everyone is talking about cloud and the power of cloud. Do you see entrepreneurs understanding really just how critical it is to be able to harness digital, harness cloud, use IT more in their businesses, and what's the advice you would have?
See, IT, the word actually, the reaction which you get, it is an enabling aspect. Digital is the business. That's the fundamental difference, right? So, as we think of a startup, if you are not conversant with the power of digital, the chances are you will not succeed, because you are building something for the future, not for the past. So, it's very, very important to get plugged in, understand the power, the disintermediation, the disruption which digital is bringing to traditional models. And by the way, that itself can spark a new idea for you to be supremely successful. So one doesn't have a choice but to learn and know about digital. Doesn't matter whether you're a micro, mini, medium or large enterprise. This is true for all of us.
Okay, so I want to sum up this conversation, and as we end, ask you, if there is one piece of advice you would have for entrepreneurs, what would that be?
Stay true to yourself. Retain the spirit of entrepreneurship. Don't allow anyone to kill it, because you have a brighter future than larger companies, because the world is going to belong to agile, boutique, specialized companies. And entrepreneurs have that ability to be that company. So keep the spirit alive.
Thank you very much, Ganesh, for speaking with us. It's always a pleasure. Do remember that if you have any queries for us, you can write in at theleadersoftomorrowtimesgroup.com. You can reach us on social media using the hashtag LOT, or call us on that number which is on your screen. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.